Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Is This, a Bojack podcast. Get it? Because the line from the episode we're covering, and it's in the title, and it's kind of iconic, and everybody says it in every post. Do you get it? Do you get the title? I'm only doing that once. Don't worry, you're not in for that every time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan.
And I'm Ariana, and this is a chronological exploration of Bojack Horseman. Today we're exploring Season 1, Episode 1, The Bojack Horseman Story, Chapter 1.
There's a lot of ones in there. As a disclaimer, every episode of this podcast will contain spoilers, as it is intended for people who've seen the entire series, or people who don't care about spoilers, or know the show ended half a decade ago and the internet is a thing. All right. How you doing today, Ariana?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk Bojack, and I'm a little bit nervous because I haven't been on a podcast before in a hosting setting. I'm looking forward to finally going through the show again with somebody else and getting to talk about it as opposed to being my own little insular self looking at Bojack Horseman. How about you?
I am doing all right. I've been podcasting for 9 years, but this is my first time with a co-host. And so it's just a whole new ballpark. You have other expectations to live up to. So we're both kind of going into this blind, but we do both have creation backgrounds. We're both fans of the show. I'm going to throw it to you first. What is your relationship with Bojack Horseman, the show?
So first of all, I'm the number one super fan. I'm so sorry, Dan, if you think that you are. I would like to consider that as me. Also, I'm sorry, Danny Tuchellos, if you're listening. Also me. I'm a YouTuber who sort of got their name out there by doing in defense of Bojack Horseman characters. I've been doing them for, I want to say, 6 or 7 years now, Bojack Horseman videos. And that's kind of like my background with Bojack. I've watched it 7 or 8 times now, and I feel like I'm a mini expert on the subject of the show, or at least analyzing it.
Love to hear it. And come on the show, Johnny Tuchellos. We'd love to have you. It's funny that you mention him. So my personal history with the show is a combo of him and actually you. So for background purposes of people who might not know, Ariana and I have known each other for about a year at this point. She came on my podcast, Stool Radio, about a year ago at this point.
That's crazy.
And before that, I was just like a fan of yours. And I had subscribed to your channel because you had put out a video of the detailed history of the OG Space Jam website, RIP. As well as a history of Clerks the Animated Series. So subscribe to you. I was subscribed to Johnny. And you know how when you run out of videos of people that you're following, that you're binging, but you kind of are only watching the ones about topics that you are interested in, but you still needed something in the background. Well, that happened to me with Johnny Tuchello's review of The View from Halfway Down, the penultimate episode of Bojack Horseman. And so I watched that detailed analysis of that episode before I had seen literally any of the show. And going into that with my autoplay was your In Defense of Sarah Lynn video. And so that 1-2 punch, eventually I watched The View from Halfway Down first, and then I started with the pilot. So it was an interesting way of going about it that honestly I wouldn't recommend it, but I would not recommend it because there are so many callbacks to episodes leading up to that episode where it was almost like a game in and of itself, pointing them out. So Ariana, thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. It's been wonderful getting to know you over the last year, and I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here, and I would just like to say that I'm so sorry that I was the introduction. The show should have been the introduction. You got into it the wrong way, but I'm happy you got here one way or another.
Well, if it weren't for the two of you, I wouldn't be in it. And I don't not recommend the way I went about it. I'm not a spoilers person. I mean, I'm not someone who care so much as the outcome as I do about the journey to get there, because there's only like a handful of endings for any given narrative. So it is what it is for me most of the time. But yeah, we're covering the pilot right now. And how many times have you seen this before the other day? Because this is probably like my third time watching the pilot as opposed to the rest of season 2 and onward, which I've seen about 7 or 8 at this point.
I'm going to say 8 or 9. I'm a bit of a completist. You gave your background on like how you actually got to know Bojack. I was 20 sitting in my job watching the show as I was supposed to when it came out in 2014. I want to say 2015, whenever it was.
Oh, damn.
So like I've seen it every single time I go back and watch Bojack, which is now has been like between 7 and 9 times. I've seen it. So it's like this is drilled into my brain line for line.
That's commitment right there. I admire people who can do that. I am not one of those people. Polly, shut up. Get over here. I'm so sorry.
Polly's the dog for reference, I'm assuming.
He is the dog.
Okay.
He is the dog. He is a frequent appearer on Soul Radio, doing exactly what he just did. I don't edit it out because it's kind of become a running gag in and of itself. So,
So what was your first impression when you first watched this show? Like, what was your first impression when you watched the first pilot episode versus when you watched it this time? Like, what was going on in your head?
I had a couple of friends who had watched the series in full, and I got the warning of the first handful of episodes are nothing in tone or in a lot of characters, the way that you come to know everybody later on. I was warned you kind of need to sit through it, a la the first season of The Office, first season of Breaking Bad, but you'll be grateful that you did. And I did that, and I don't know, my problem with the pilot, and maybe it was intentional, was that it comes across so much. It feels like so many of the other shows in the adult animation space, both at the time and today. The snappy dialogue, the cutaway gags, kind of describing one's character in words rather than showing. And I don't. What was your reaction going back to this episode, knowing everything that you know up at this point?
Going back, and like, I think this viewing specifically was interesting because I was looking at it within its own, like, I'm holding a hairband in my hand. I'm so sorry. This episode was interesting going into it because normally I go into it looking for like one specific thing. Like I'm looking for one person's character going on, or like I'm here for the journey and like I'm thinking about it in context of other things. This was the first time I sat back and was just like, well, let's just look at the episode as it is. And in that frame of mind, I actually felt like it held up pretty well. I was shocked about how many like cutaway gags and like how many cutaway gags there were and how related it was to, like you were saying, the adult animation space at the time and like looking at the world that it was in when it was made. But like it's, for me, it weirdly holds up. Like the overt exposition about character feels like it works within the world, knowing how exposition-y Todd is and how much he likes to talk about his feelings. And I also thought it was fun. I'm just going off now. I thought it was fun because usually like everyone likes Bojack. Like there's not really many people that don't like Bojack. I know that when I'm making my defense videos, people usually say like, well, Bojack doesn't need a defense. Bojack's great. Bojack's wonderful, which is weird. But this, or like we're all, sorry, let me think about what I'm going to say. People like Bojack, and it's weird that people like Bojack considering he's such like a jerk, as we established later in the show. But the fact that everybody keeps saying like Bojack's such a great guy, or like the fact that they're with Bojack throughout this first episode tells us why we're rooting for him. Like it primes us to like this guy that really has no save the cat moment. Did it make any sense? I feel like I rambled, but like in my head, that all made a lot of sense about the first thoughts on the episode going back to it.
Now that you bring that up, I think that was my biggest issue with the pilot in comparison to, I'm going to say, the telescope going forward. I feel like everything before the telescope was in that adult animation archetype where everybody's an asshole. There's a couple redeemable characters out there, but they're also like punching bags made to be insulted by the asshole protagonist, which it falls a lot into that category, especially with the way that Bojack talks about Mr. Peanut Butter to Diane. So I was looking back. So we have a shared Google Doc. You brought up other series that kind of had a shaky first season and kind of developed its characters as it went on. And you brought up Parks and Rec, and you brought up Bob's Burgers, which led me to look up this thing I heard about The Office a long time ago. So in season 1, Michael Scott is like an irredeemable asshole. He's a racist, misogynist, and everybody around him kind of acts accordingly toward him. They're treating him like shit as well. And the show was in danger of getting canceled. It got renewed for like a Hail Mary season 2, and the writers made a conscious decision to increase the niceness both to and from Michael by exactly 10%. And I feel like, and it did wonders for The Office. Michael became he was still incompetent, but he was relatable and you kind of rooted for him. And it wasn't such a stark contrast where we noticed it consciously or it became a distraction. And I feel like from the telescope on, that happened with most of the main cast of Bojack, if not all of the main cast. I think the starkest contrast for me was like Bojack and Todd. Bojack didn't really have the redeeming qualities, and Todd was more of like just kind of an irritating slacker. You could tell they kind of didn't fully know what they wanted to do with him quite yet. He was more inconsiderate, like in that first scene where it's like, oh yeah, sorry, I got high and ate all your Pop-Tarts. Where that wasn't that was kind of Todd, but not really Todd. You would expect like a zanier story leading up to him eating the Pop-Tarts. You know what I mean?
There would be more to it. Well, I think that it's interesting that you brought up that Todd would be more zany. Like Todd would turn into someone more zany, because I noticed that he did put a misadventure in the first episode, but the misadventure is so dark. Like he's cheating drug lords out of money, and like his friend got shot, and like he had to hold a quinceañera for this girl, or else he'd murder him. Like that is like it felt like they were going with an idea. Like it felt like they wanted him to be this like weird, quirky character, but they were like, it was too real. They weren't going for like the outside the box. It was just like, oh, this cute little teenager's eating all his Pop-Tarts. And also on the side, getting into like some really bad drug dealers.
Yeah. That it was darker, and it just, I don't know, it felt out of place with the version of Todd that we had at the moment. If we had, I think so much of what got to me about it was, I'm pretty sure this was like Aaron Paul's first real foray into voice acting. This is the project he came off of after Breaking Bad. He did the Need for Speed movie, and then he did this. And he's just speaking in his normal voice, where later on he's like kind of speaking more with his throat, and everything's more highly enunciated and kind of half shouted. And when you get all that, like I might have taken the drug lord story a little bit more. And also like that drug lord story in season 3 would have had, I don't know, clowns, ballerinas. The elements were there, and it's not so distracting where it's a complete jarring mess later on, but it's there having seen the version of the show I've come to know and then watching the pilot for like the 3rd time. I think that's what's getting to me the most.
It's like, what is happening? The one that got to me was like the one that like weirdly got to me, despite the fact that he didn't have very much screen time, was Mr. Peanut Butter. Mr. Peanut Butter was just a Hollywood jerk. I forgot that. I think that interpretation of Mr. Peanut Butter set me up for the rest of the show, because like every time I see him being like this cutesy little guy that everyone loves later on in the series, I'm like, no. But the first episode, like he was all schmoozy and mean to Bojack. Like when he asks when he asked Bojack and Princess Carolyn if he could sit down with them when they're breaking up. Like there's no way that could be interpreted in a nice way. And it always sits in the back of my head with me where it's like, you're sure he's this nice guy, whatever, through the rest of the series. But he's also that guy that was like trying to provoke Bojack during his breakup. It was like, that was the most jarring thing for me.
Yeah, whereas later on you see that Mr. Peanut Butter, I wouldn't say he doesn't have a vindictive bone in his body, but he uses them sparingly and when he absolutely needs to. Like when he's defending his brother against Diane or calling Bojack out for trying to kiss his wife. Like, it's not that he doesn't have a backbone, but most of the time he's this like unflappable, highly loyal, so enthusiastic that it's obnoxious kind of person where they increased the dog in him by 10%, I think.
He comes across like in the rest of the series, and I know I know this isn't a deep dive into the rest of the series, but he comes across as somebody who's so confident that's like, if you fuck with me, whatever, like I can bounce back. I like who I am and I understand who I am and like the position that I'm in. But here it was like, it was really like he was schmoozing. And I think Erica is the biggest representation of that, because as you go through the show and he keeps like talking to Erica and we realize that like she's actually somebody who like is going through a lot in her life. Mr. Peanut Butter going over to her seems like he's legitimately just checking in on some person that he like sees periodically. Then the first episode, he calls out Erica and it's just like he's avoiding Bojack to talk to some like hot girl named Erica who like is at this big Hollywood party, big Hollywood quinceañera.
Yeah, and that same party scene where you see Diane and Bojack have their first ever conversation, at least like chronologically in the series. You would also expect Diane to defend Mr. Peanut Butter right away and kind of get on a high horse about it. But instead, she kind of like stands there. And then when Bojack finds out that they're together, she's just completely cool about it. It's like, yeah, no, we're together. Just completely ignoring that everything that Bojack said before and still agreeing to take a job from him.
See, I think that her not defending Mr. Peanut Butter makes sense in that moment. Because if my camera's shaking. Because if she's trying to get a job from Bojack, and Bojack is some guy that like she like very much looks up to because he gave her some sort of comfort and she has some sort of parasocial relationship with him. It would make sense where she's like, it's okay, I'm gonna absorb all this in and then I'm gonna get the job. Also, she then takes all the information that she collects from him in these off hours and writes it into the book. So, like, I guess it's just a bit of journalism there.
But was she that calculated later on in the series? Would be my counter question.
I argue that that's her being nice to Bojack was less, like, I know I said it was a little bit calculated, and I'm sure it is. I think her being nice to Bojack in that moment, despite the fact that he's shitting on her boyfriend, is more of like, oh my God, this big celebrity is talking to me that I really much look up to. That is this big celebrity that I very much look up to is talking to me. And like, he can have his own opinions, but that's okay. He doesn't notice, whatever. I think she gets more calculated later. Like, I think she becomes somebody who is more of she's more looking for ways to like not be taken advantage of. And I think that's where that comes in. But here in this moment, like in my head, she's just someone who's like, oh my God, this is Bojack. Maybe I'm oversimplifying Diane in this moment, but I'm trying to look at her like, this is how I would feel if I was her talking to some guy that like I have been watching for my entire childhood. And I see myself as a little bit of a Diane. So that's why I'm allowing myself to put that on her.
That's completely understandable. So the meat of the story in the pilot was kind of navigating the relationship between Bojack and Princess Carolyn. And I don't know, there's something about Princess Carolyn's character that I feel like it's probably the closest to the finished product out of the other three. But there's also there's a hint of delusion in her about where she stands with Bojack in the context of their relationship. And I can't decide whether that would have happened regardless, because you kind of get stupid about somebody when you really care about them, or if she would have been more realistic about it had they kind of rewritten the pilot later in the series. What's your take on her characterization here?
Sorry, so sorry, can you repeat that? I'm just trying to like
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of open on their breakup. They had already been kind of like on and off for years. Princess Carolyn is making breakfast in the kitchen a couple scenes later because they had hooked up the night before. And she is separating the business and the personal, but she's still like wildly enthusiastic even that following morning when she probably should have known that it was a drunken hookup, but she's kind of treating it like a relationship. And I feel like she wouldn't have done that as if she was the person she was later on in the series, especially when you go back to flashback episodes, because she's, even in the flashbacks, she's more cynical there than she is in the pilot.
That's an interesting point. Because in my head, like, again, me being the person that projects, like, in my head, it's like, okay, they're just two close friends. Like, sure, they've had a history, but like, whatever. Like, of course, they're going to stay over and hang out and do whatever, especially if they had a good relationship working or not. But like, you're so right. Like, at this point, she had been with him for years, like decades on and off.
Yeah.
And like that wouldn't have flied. It feels a lot of this, and you're going off of that, it feels like a lot of the pilot is not, people aren't as strong-willed and like aware of their boundaries as they are in the rest of the show, but in a way that's like, why weren't you before? Like it doesn't, if Carolyn is the way that she is with the history that she's had, like assuming that they thought about that, she would not have let Bojack walk all over her, especially for like how many decades they've been together. Like literally decades. It's been his entire career. I'm curious, like, to what level did they plan out the series in the beginning of the show? Like, because I know that usually when you write a pilot or you write a show, you have to kind of understand where the series is going. Like Bojack 100% would have had some concept, but at what point did they realize that it was going to be what it was going to be, and like realize that the characters were going to be so like sad and depressed and so real in their sadness and depression? Like, I know that that's what the concept of the show was, but it feels like it got real dark real quickly past like the first season.
Okay, so here's my theory about this. I actually added all of this shit to the Google Doc late last night after like having a hard time researching intentions of Raphael Bob Waxberg or any of the writers when it came to this, because it is such like, it's such a massive tonal shift that happens kind of in one episode, which leads me to believe that this was probably, okay, for context, like Donald Glover, he created the series Atlanta in 2015, 2016. It premiered in 2016. But in order to sell it to FX, he had to play the first handful of episodes that he presented a little less weird to the executives than he initially wanted to. And so if you watch the pilot, it's such a surreal show, and there's some surrealist elements in there in the first couple of episodes, but it really focuses on Donald Glover's character's relationship with his kid's mom and his relationship with his parents, and just the straightforward narrative of him trying to manage his cousin's burgeoning rap career. But he called it straight up in an interview with the AV Club as a Trojan horse, where he had to put the more conventional elements in to sell the series and then have the leeway to do what he wanted in the second half of the first season and see the audience's reaction to it. And that leads me to believe that RB Dubs probably had to do something similar to get Bojack greenlit. And the first handful of episodes were probably everything before the telescope. That's my theory. I have no supporting evidence on his side, but based on the way it's been talked about for other shows that got equally weird, equally like almost instantly, that's my guess.
See, and that would make sense, especially with that. Hold on, I had a thought. We can cut this part out.
No, go on.
Because I'm thinking, I'm thinking about it because it makes sense with the fact that like it was so start now. That would make sense, especially considering like we were mentioning before with the adult animation at the time, how close it was to like Family Guy. Like the amount of cutaway gags and the amount of just like random stuff that happens that feels like it's just an XD raw random joke is insane. And I don't remember if it happens as much later in the series, but it's like it feels jarring in Bojack, especially given like what's about to happen. And it feels like every horrible thing is set up in like the first season, but they never talk about it. They never like mention how deep it is. No one really cares about what's happening. They're all kind of like happy in their all broken world, which again, I know the show is about getting yourself broken to build yourself up again. And then that cycle repeats. But like in a world that is so real, how come the realism happens? How come the realism started when we come into the place? Like if that makes any sense. Like there would have been turmoil ahead of us coming in.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's the whole like art versus commerce, like eternal struggle with everything that we watch. You often wonder like what something that you love would have been like had the showrunner or creator been just given full creative control, and would we love it as much?
Well, I mean, like, so I'm working on a video right now about the Iron Giant, and that's why the Iron Giant's right there because I just have that stuff out.
Nice.
Thank you. I'm specifically speaking about in the video how Brad Bird was just given full creative reign, and the reason they didn't kind of push it as much was because he was given full creative reign, and they didn't want to like show that that was a thing that you can do and it would do well. Or like Sinners. Have you heard of what's happening with Sinners recently?
I hear it. I hear it's like been getting a lot of both high praise and high criticism. I've yet to see it. I'm probably seeing it on Wednesday.
I'm waiting for the 70 millimeter to come out, or 35, 70 millimeter. There is a millimeter of some kind coming out into theaters, and I'm waiting for that to happen. But the controversy with Sinners is that the weekend that it came out, it had a box office of like $35 million, which is like an insane box office. That's a lot of money considering nobody goes to the movies anymore. And I think it was Variety. Their headline was like, "Oh, Paramount's now not going to do Paramount." I'm throwing out names. Whatever the studio it was that did Sinners, is like not going to do any original IP anymore because it didn't do very well. Blah blah blah. Which is again a crazy headline for a movie that did insanely well for the first weekend. And then Diller came out and basically said that like Sinners is a great movie, and this was a weird take. But what's happening was the director of Sinners, again, is it Ryan Coogler?
I'm looking it up.
Okay. The director of Sinners, and tell me when you haven't. The directors of Sinners negotiated so that he would own the IP and that he basically had like an insane amount of control over the property, which barely happens. Like no director ever is able to like get the IP. So they're trying to bury it.
Wow. You were right. It was Ryan Coogler, by the way.
Yes, I did it. I have an obscene amount of small trivial knowledge. But with Sinners, they did exactly what they wanted, and the studio wasn't going to like basically let him have his day, because then it would encourage other people to fight for more control and to argue for IP over the property. So like going back to Bojack. going back to the point of Bojack, and it might be a loose point, but like I wonder what would have happened like if Netflix didn't give them that level of creative control, because I don't think that the creators had like as much of a background before this. I wonder what it would have been. I wonder what like the unapologetic, unfiltered version of Bojack would have been in the first season, or the first episode at least.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting time capsule. Looking at it now, knowing what the show becomes, it's such a huge part of why I wanted to, get rid of the whole spoiler-free aspect of the podcast, because most of the people who've seen it who are going to see it have seen it already. I would like to discuss like foreshadowing and character changes and plot holes and all that kind of shit. But what did you think of that first scene, which is Bojack's interview with Charlie Rose, who was doing a weird amount of appearances as himself pretty much in the final years leading up to his cancellation? And it's weird that he didn't play himself here because he was just playing himself in the penultimate episode of Breaking Bad in the Chris Rock vehicle top 5. So Bojack he gives his reasoning for why he appreciates sitcoms, because, it's a singular story and it's going to end up being okay in the end. And it serves as like a double meaning for him in my eyes. It's halfway, this is how I was raised. I was warped into thinking that life is TV because my parents were shitty and the best time in my life was working on this show. And so it kind of got subconsciously knocked in my head that this is how relationships should actually be, as well as like the shift in TV at the time, around about a decade ago, because sitcoms were kind of on the decline. Prestige TV was very much the thing at the moment, and I feel like it was the show itself kind of trying to find a medium in between the two.
Yeah, it was. So first off, I thought the opening scene of Charlie Rose was brilliant as an idea because it establishes him as an actor and he gets to talk openly and talk about the fact that he's drunk, blah, blah, blah. I thought it was a good idea. But it's interesting how basically he's commenting on the shows that have come before him. And like the shows within, I know I keep talking about the cultural context of adult animation. He's basically talking about the cultural context of adult animation. I wish I had looked more at what Raphael his intentions were before coming into this today. But I think that's a good question. I need to give me a sec. Hold on.
Do you think?
I know that's not biting podcast speak. But we can cut this part out where I'm thinking.
I'm not a biting podcast speak person. I'm constantly stammering and rethinking my words in the moment. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Thank you. No, that's interesting because it's like it is. Sometimes you do what. So the adults have caught the adult animation of now. Okay, so I don't have a theory, but I subscribe to the theory that TV seems to reflect what people are doing the opposite of at the time. So like when things tend to be really, really good, people like to like watch more depressing things because they need some turmoil in their life. They need a reason to complain and they need something to grip onto. And if things are really bad, usually the TV that comes from that is like really happy and joyful and light. And I think Bojack was coming at a time that was like really happy and joyful and light. Like it wasn't great, but it was like, what, 2014? What was going on?
Oh yeah, Obama administration.
We hadn't known about Trump yet, like we did, but like in a very limited capacity where he wasn't trying to run for president. Like it was a pretty happy time and nothing really bad was happening at the time. So like there's only so much happy and like joyful you can take. And like there was also a lot of sitcoms going on. I know Prestige TV was like a huge thing, but like me being me, whenever Prestige TV was happening, I didn't watch it because I literally had no way of watching it. Like unless I was stealing things, what I was able to watch was like network TV and YouTube because I didn't know how to steal things in 2014. But I think it was a response to like so many happy things happening and like so many happy TV shows and so many sitcoms like going on at the time. Like Big Bang Theory was a big thing I remember. And like
it was.
I was a huge Big Bang Theory fan. No longer, but I was. And I think this is Bojack is him being I think Bojack is a way of being like, listen, I like watching animated shows. I like watching the things that exist now, but like to what end? Like I'm going through my own stuff. There's so much happy things out there. Like I need something gritty and biting to like remind me that I have a clan of people that are also sad and like not everybody's happy and not everyone's doing their own thing. Because I remember watching Bojack and being like, holy shit, this is the only show that I've watched in recent years where it's like, oh my God, they're really talking about how I feel. And like, no one ever talks about depression. Oh my God, we should be talking about this. Bojack is our vehicle. And that's kind of why I did so well, because Bojack was the only thing that really talked about the human condition that was on TV that people could watch openly and freely. And I know Netflix isn't that, but more people had Netflix back then versus packages to AMC and HBO.
And it was $7 a month ad free back in the day. We didn't know what we had.
I mean, I don't pay for Netflix anymore, but I also know how to steal things. So
there you go. Yeah, I mean, I've Netflix included in my T-Mobile plan. So as far as I'm concerned, I get free Netflix, but my phone bill's a little too high. And that's the way I think about it.
I have Netflix included in my my parent-in-law's plan, where they have Netflix and then we get to tether off their Netflix.
Sweet. Good old fashioned, piracy, but not really, but kind of.
It's actually not illegal in Canada. I don't know what it is for you, but in Canada, where I am, it's not illegal to stream stolen media. It's only illegal to distribute it. So that's my workaround. But so I thought it was interesting when he's like, sometimes you just want a show about likable people, and like the show feels like it's gonna fall within the realm of what's happening in normal TV, but it's really setting you up to be like, by the way, this isn't this. And you forget about it when it gets really dark, because you're like, oh, but this is what other shows were. But they totally they primed you in the first episode and then you dropped it because like the rest of the show was pretty light and airy. But they primed you and they didn't realize it. You just forgot. Or at least I did.
And they do kind of plant seeds in following episodes, is leading you to the big shift that is the telescope, which I can't wait to get to that episode. But you hear about a little bit about his history on Horse and Round, his relationship with Herb. You know that you kind of find out he has cancer when Bojack does, and that's when it just all goes downhill. So the seeds are planted. So it doesn't feel completely like a rug pull. It feels more like a natural transition, but goddamn, does it shift quickly.
Like almost immediately. Not to go forward, but I remember I watched the first episode again with my fiance, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that really does get darker." Like Diane's parents, and I'm like, Diane's parents aren't like, they're in this season. If Diane's parents, the darkest part of the first season, technically in my head, was later, like, oh my God, what would have happened?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like they dip their toes.
I completely forgot about the arc with Diane's parents.
They just dropped them because they bring her up. Oh, sorry. But they bring them up in the first season and you're like, oh, cute. This feels relatable. If Diane's parents happened later, like there'd be like abuse. There'd be like, you would really get to see the general, like it would not be funny. It would be closer to a Princess Carolyn, even though Princess Carolyn's is pretty, it's a lot more depressing than Diane, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Something I want to bring up that you brought up in your notes is how often Bojack watches Horsing Around in the pilot alone. Because I feel like they drop that whole thing almost instantly, but it seems like up to this point that it's compared to like the Horsing Around DVDs are compared to Linus's blanket from Peanuts, and he's just constantly like viewing this past version of himself. And they kind of drop that. Why do you I think it's a good idea. Why do you think they got rid of it so quickly?
See, I think they got rid of it so quickly because it was never meant to be something they talked about. I don't think they completely drop it. They do use it in situations where it's like really dark. So like whenever Bojack's like actually sad or he's like reminiscing on something terrible, like when Sarah Lynn died, then he'll go back and watch the DVDs. Like he does watch it periodically when he's like going through stuff. But yeah, I think it's really funny that they introduced it the first episode and then like kind of peered it off, because it's kind of like, no, we're just introducing this. Just know this is happening behind the scenes. It's basically Bojack going to the bathroom. You know what's happening, but we don't need to dwell on it. It's just part of the story.
Absolutely.
What's your take on what was your thought when you saw the fact that he was watching Horsing Around so frequently within the first episode?
I felt like it was a good visual. I think it was a good visual representation of the idea that he was living in the past. But I think it was a good idea for them to pull back on it, except for in instances where it can provide context to present narratives. It wouldn't have been sustainable as a long-term gag, and I'm glad they got rid of it as that. I do like the Horsing Around Christmas special, which is a standalone thing on Netflix for some fucking reason, more than most, because it really does nail down the tone of like a cheesy 90s sitcom so well. And just the back and forth commentary between Bojack and Todd. So I wish there was more horsing around lore, but I get why there isn't, and I think ultimately it was a good idea to pull back.
Yeah, I've only seen that horsing around episode once, like the real one with the Christmas. I can't do it. See, I really don't like 90s sitcoms, even in a joking sense. I can't do it. And I'm glad we don't really get to see it, and I don't have to subject myself to it. I understand the context that he's coming from and the world that he's was living in, and never make me watch it. I didn't watch Full House, and I'm glad that they're not making me watch Horsing Around.
See, I think I'm with you on a dislike of 90s sitcoms, like for the record. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air notwithstanding, that is the one and only exception for me. But when I was little, I would get babysat at my neighbor's house while both of my parents worked. And man, that woman had like nothing but Full House on that TV all the time and Saved by the Bell. And so even though I hated it, I like knew all the conventions, and I just had such like a contempt for the format as a whole. And I think that's why I like the Christmas special, because it really is, it's more of a critique of the medium than it is an homage to it. And I feel like whoever came up with that idea was like, oh, you were forced to watch this shit as a kid too, huh?
I find it interesting that you have like a nostalgic feeling towards the 90s sitcoms because you're a little bit older than me, I think. And I did not grow up with the 90s sitcoms. Like my parents were showing me like Green Acres from the six. So I grew up watching my parents' sitcoms that they would watch back in like the 60s and 70s. So it was a lot of Welcome Back Kotter, and it was a lot of like not HR Puff and stuff, but like a lot of Welcome Back Kotter, Mary Tyler Moore, Beverly Hillbillies, stuff like that. So like I never thought about the fact that Bojack being who he was would have like a resonance with the audience they were aiming for. Like it would add an extra level of like emotionality that like this is the person that you were watching when you were younger that made you feel so much comfort. Now this is what he's doing. For me, he's like, oh yeah, I have no personal connection to 90s sitcoms. My parents never made me watch them, and I was kind of a little too young to watch them. So like for me, this is just a man doing like who was famous and now who he is not. And this is the cheesy show he was on, but there's no really deeper emotional meaning to the 90s sitcom for me. And I think that's kind of like an interesting difference in where we're coming to this from.
Yeah, and it's also just the contrast of TV versus real life. And I don't know, I didn't read the biography, but I listened to a podcast about the biography. Shout out to the homie Chelsea Devontes, who she does a podcast called Glamorous Trash, where she goes over celebrity memoirs. And she went over Matthew Perry's memoir maybe like a year and a half ago. It was like right before he died, he put this book out. And Matthew Perry is basically real life Bojack Horseman, to the point where I wonder how much of his life they actually lived it. Where he was just kind of happy to be there in the beginning and then grew really complacent and cynical about it near the end and fell into stagnation and addiction, both kind of like in the middle of the series, but it really spiraled when he didn't have a set schedule anymore. And so I think rewatching the pilot and seeing like Bojack's cynicism brought me back to that memoir that, again, I didn't read, but I know exists.
It's I think it feels like a common thing that happens with a lot of actors who are past their prime. But I also think it's interesting. I keep saying interesting. I also think so. What resonated with me about that was like feeling like you're past your prime. I don't think I'm past my prime. I'm 30, but like everybody has a moment where they're like, "Oh my god, is this it? Is this all that I am?" At any point in your life, and I think with actors, they're able to go a little bit farther with it because they have the money for drugs and the wherewithal and
Yeah.
nothing else to do. I don't want to do drugs, but like they have the money and the time and whatever. But like I think the idea of the idea of him being like a old Hollywood celebrity is just like the the extreme of what anybody else would go through in like a very similar situation. I actually, you know what? The most jarring thing that stood out to me about the episode that I didn't write down because I was like, this is just something I thought about and like whatever, is when Diane said about the guy who did the dad in the Brady Bunch. When he's like, this guy was a trained actor and he did the Brady Bunch and he was so depressed about it. But most people don't even do the Brady Bunch version of what they want to do. I remember watching
Yeah.
that like every time I watched it, I've skimmed past that line. It's like, whatever, like, great. You don't get to, but you still only did the Brady Bunch. When I watched it this time, like that line stuck so hard with me. It's like it's that line like weirdly hit where it was like, oh my God, you're right. Most people don't get to do the Brady Bunch version of what they're doing. Like, even if you feel like you've stagnated in a place that you feel like you should have grown or something that you should love, like the idea of being thankful and being appreciative of the life that you're living and having the people around you that you have, or like being able to do the things that you're doing, or just the fact that you're living in a country that is semi-free or whatever. Like there is like that's an insane notion that I just skimmed past, and I imagine everybody else who watches BoJack skimmed past, or like the point, or BoJack skims past. Like it's such like a beautiful line, and if BoJack just appreciated that, the whole show would not exist. Like if BoJack listened to the first line that Diane says when she says him about the Brady Bunch, the entire show wouldn't be on, and we wouldn't be watching it. And I think that's really interesting. And the '90s actor, I think, is the X amount of that. Like everybody thinks they plateaued. It's just they plateaued real hard in front of a lot of people, but like they got to do it. I didn't get to be on Friends. God.
No, me neither. What the fuck? I did audition for Home Alone 3, but that's a whole nother story.
Did you actually?
I did.
What did you audition for?
I did. Whoever the replacement for Macaulay Culkin was, I stood in line for 4 hours and got to meet with somebody for 5 minutes, and I never got called back, but they were holding auditions in Chicago. And my barber recommended it to my parents because I was in theater at the time. And at the time I did look like a match for Macaulay Culkin. And it's like, well, they're trying to find another one because the other kid won't do it. And it didn't work out, but I just remember being really fucking sweaty in that room.
It's for the best. Then you would have remembered for Home Alone. And or Home Alone 3, and no one wants that.
I know, like I dodged a fucking bullet. Like I'm podcasting for 50 people. Like that's a better situation as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to be the Home Alone 3 guy.
I would pay you not to be the Home Alone 3. I would pay to not be the Home Alone 3 guy. There is I think it's a Canadian, I want to say it's a Canadian documentary, but I might be wrong, but I'm going to take credit for it, even though might not be ours. There's a whole documentary on the kids that didn't get to be Macaulay Culkin's character in Home Alone 1. It's just about kid. It's the kids who auditioned that didn't get it. It's really fun. I haven't seen it. I've heard about it. It's on my list. Anyway,
I gotta watch that. I did just drive my kids by the house because it's like 25 minutes away from me. And those poor owners who, you know what? No, they knew what they were getting into when they decided to live there. But yeah, there's constantly people taking pictures of themselves doing this in front of it.
I think they have to warn you ahead of time. Like I think the Amityville Horror House, it's a similar thing. Like they people bought it and like they destroyed it so that it didn't look like the Amityville Horror House anymore. And like the people who are horror fans are really upset about that because the previous people were like really into the lore of their house. As a nice little side note about famous houses.
Walter White's house is on the market right now for like a 400% markup. So yeah, that shit does make a difference.
I should just start filming famous movies in my area and see what happens.
You absolutely, I mean, you're in Toronto, like which means you're like 6 or 7 different cities. Like you should just start stocking sets.
That's the problem. Like this is a tangent. We have so many things filming here that nothing matters. Like The Boys is filming here all the time. And like, like it doesn't the value doesn't go up because they pretend it's New York. Yeah, my fiance's working on the Star Trek right now, Strange New Worlds. And I keep hearing stories about how like Star Trek and like how they're doing all these things with like in Hamilton. And I'm like, and nobody knows. They all think it's in space or San Francisco.
I love it. Is there anything else you want to cover? I think I got through all my shit.
Oh, I think we could talk about You Don't Respect Me Enough to Have a Baby with Me, which I thought was a weird line.
Yes.
So when Princess Carolyn said to Bojack, "You don't respect me enough to have a baby with me," I did not understand what it meant when I was 20, and I thought maybe I'll get it when I'm older. It's been 12 years, 10 to 12 years. I don't understand. I still don't get it. Like, and it's funny because now I realize that she's just quoting Bojack from earlier. B, within the idea that she's just quoting Bojack from earlier, it makes me think that he's just trying to forward think way too far advanced in the future. Like, that is she asking him, like, is he thinking about like when they're getting married, or is she asking to have a baby as a donor? Like, I don't know, but I really don't understand it, and I don't think I ever will. So my question to you is, what's your interpretation of the line? Does it make sense? Am I crazy? Is it just not supposed to make sense? Because I quote that line literally, not joking, every day, and I don't understand what it means.
You are not crazy in the sense that I don't think there is a meaning to that quote that makes sense. The thing I attribute it to is just Princess Carolyn's forward thinking as a career person. You find out later in the series that she, like her, how am I trying to put this? You find out that she learns how to embrace her personal life by almost treating it like work. She, treats her baby like a client. And what do you do when you have a new client? Like, you forward think, like you have the game plan of, all right, you're going to do a couple of shit roles for like TV shows, and you're going to be in this movie. And then I know you want to do art house movies, but I need you to like be in this like superhero piece of shit. And then you're going to have all the money in the world where we can just put your name on any weird like A24 thing that you want, and you'll be doing what you want for the rest of your life. It's like a 10-step plan. And if I had to give a meaning to that, that was probably a plan she had for Bojack in her head that she may or may not have discussed with him in the past. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think I accidentally muted myself. That would make sense then, because to have a baby, it's a love. Like, theoretically, it's love. Like, that's what they tell you. And for her and for Bojack, I guess it would be respect. Like, to have a baby with somebody is to respect them that much. All right, I'm a happy person now. I kind of understand it. I get it. But yeah, I just thought it was insane. And that's kind of my last point about the show. It also invited a clip. That's all I'm going to say.
Awesome. I like these tangents, by the way. I think people will stick around for them.
I like tangents too. They're half of the way that I talk.
Oh yeah. I mean, half the reason I listen to Talking Simpsons, who I'm, kind of modeling this show after, but not really. There's like a million Simpsons podcasts out there, but I like these hosts the most because they banter and they go on tangents, and I learn about them because I could listen to any like AI generated recap of any given episode, and that's not going to entertain me. But we're funny as fuck, Ari. Like,
we're unappreciated in our time, but that's only because the podcast hasn't come out, and then we will be appreciated in our time because they will hear it. Yeah, I'm very new to this whole, like, as you can appreciate, I'm very new to podcasting. I say that I write all my scripts word for word verbatim because I don't know how to talk out loud well in a large chunk. But
I
I
don't
will
know
get
why you
better.
keep saying.
Because I got my own mental hangups. BoJack's my favorite show. We all wonder why. This is why.
I
No,
think it's just because you're Canadian.
we want to respect people and we want to respect their time and we want to say sorry and acknowledge the
No.
problem before it happens.
No, and you don't need to do that. I'm not trying to like put you on the spot here, but like, no, I planned on making a Canadian joke. That was my one. So
Make as many as you want. As long as we're not 51st Jake stating jokes, we're good.
cool. No, my friend, one of my best friends listens to my podcast, my other podcast, fairly often. And when he listened to the one of you and me, he did text me later on. He was like, I can tell this person's Canadian because she's apologizing for making really valid arguments.
We tend to do that. No, I think I would like to say we're all very polite. I don't know because I don't have as much frame of reference with Americans, but like Canadians are rude. I mean, I live in Toronto, which is I think the least Canadian of all the places. But like, it's Toronto and all of Alberta. But like, we're just like normal, regular people. As soon as you get outside of Toronto, though, it's weirdly wholesome and also like rarely angry. It's a weird mix of things. But outside of Toronto, GTA, just regular, angry, Americanish type people that are vehemently patriotic.
Chicago is weird because it's kind of like a melting pot of everything surrounding it. So we have, the rudeness of East Coast New Yorker types, and then we have the, I wouldn't say nice, but nice to your face folks from like Minnesota and small towns and Wisconsin. And it's just everybody like you couldn't do Chicago on purpose. It's just too many of people. It is the way that people joke about Florida being minus the alligators.
See, I always thought that Chicago was like New York light. Like I went to New York and I went to Chicago, and in my head, Chicago is just like, you're just a small New York and you got that bean. And like I don't think like in my head there is as much like of a distinct thing. I know there's a lot of gangsters. That's what I know about Chicago. I went to Chicago when I was in high school. There was a lot of gangsters tours, and I just assumed there's just a lot of Italians shooting each other. But I'm allowed to make that joke because I'm Italian.
There you go.
That's my my reference.
Oh yeah, no, I make jokes at the Irish expense all the damn time. I feel you there.
It's the
all right. Ari, thank you so much for this. Is exciting. I'm excited to get the fucking ball rolling. Where can people find you?
They can find me at Ariana Alexis on YouTube and on Instagram at 500 Days of Ari.
All right. You can find my other podcast, Slow Radio, on YouTube and various parts of the audio-only podcast sphere. My shit is horribly disorganized. I'll be the first person to admit that. And you can follow me over here. I'm Dan Carlin. That is, I am Dan Carlin. All right. I didn't come up with an outro. Do you have any outro catchphrases? Like, I'm just putting you on the spot right now because I didn't.
What is this, a Bojack Horseman podcast? Yes, it is. That is what you just listened to, and you'll hear another one the next time we make one. I'm trying to go off the title. I hope every week we should just do a new one. That's the plan.